Or sports.
Sports,
Yeah.
Can you hear us, Mike?
That's funny. I have an annual quota of Reese's peanut butter cups. It's all sweet.
Mike, we can't hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Great.
Guess we'll just go without and see what happens.
Oh, she's out there. He's wandering around. Looking like he's about to retire. I thought it was his.
Oh, he's sick.
Oh, how was it then? I was from a distance. See if I knew my distance
Boy.
maybe isn't that good. Well, even they were wearing them.
It's Parker.
Maybe I do need to.
Like
No, it was somebody tall. Who's taller?
Call to order at 1:31. Roll call, Mayor Todd Lands, go around the room.
Susie Holmes, finance director.
David Kelly, city manager.
Kevin Thompson, assistant city manager, and government director.
Councilmember backing.
Chief Ferguson is absent.
Due to illness. Not retirement yet. All right, B, public comments. The public may speak on any item not listed on the agenda at this time. There's no public inside the room. Or on as attendees. Nope. All right. Moving on to approval of minutes. We have the October 2nd and the April 3rd minutes to approve. The reason April 3rd is on there is Michael was absent and they never got published.
Move approval and my iPad is actually stuck on the minutes.
Second.
Speaking of.
All right, anyone against? Great. Moving right along into new business. First one is discussion on the website domain change.
Mayor, Chair, if it's okay with you, we have Greg Isom joining us as a participant. He was going to speak to item E2 voter survey results. We also have our city attorney here to talk about mobile home rent control. If you agree, we move item E2, E3 up.
If Greg is so impatient, we can absolutely do so. There he is.
Hey, guys. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine, Greg.
Okay, let me just pull up the survey really quickly. Do you want me to go over the whole survey or just the highlights or the lowlights? Which one?
If you want to walk us through your PowerPoint slide, that'd be great.
Okay, give me 2 seconds. Let's see.
I can pull it up as well, Greg, if you prefer.
If you could pull it up, that'd be fantastic. Yes.
Sure. 1 second. Just let me know when you'd like to switch slides.
Perfect. All right, there we go. So let's go to the next page. So the methodology, guys, we did the survey. We know how many registered voters there are in the city. We decided to, we went through October 2nd through October 5th, called a bunch of your high propensity voters. A lot of different, tested voter attitudes. And I think these are some pretty good numbers to give you an idea on where you can go moving forward. So next page. So this was just our softball question, just to get people to feel comfortable with the survey. Would you say that City of Cloverdale is heading in the right direction or the wrong direction? You can see 60% right direction, 22 don't know, 18% wrong direction. That's actually pretty decent news in my opinion. A lot of times, the right direction is lower and you have more people that have no idea what's going on. But I'd say that's pretty decent when you compare yourself to other municipalities. All right, next page. So this is where we just kind of hit them, like right in the gut. We said, well, hey, the districts or, the city is looking to make some improvements, considering doing a bond. Let me read you this proposed language. So we actually read them that yellow box because generally when people vote on, measures, this is what they're going to be reading when they get their absentee ballot or when they go into the voter booth. So you can see all this, to improve the city of Cloverdale, upgrade parks and open spaces, blah, 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 23.5 million. Then you have all this legal language that's required, 1.4 million, legal rates, 6 cents, blah, blah, blah. Would you vote yes or would you vote no? And you can see that 52% said yes. about 5% are leaning yes, 11% undecided, 31% said no, 2% said lean no. The lean no's and the lean yeses, those are voters who said I'm undecided, and then they were asked a clarifying question: were you undecided leaning yes, or are you undecided leaning no? And they said, well, I'm undecided leaning yes or leaning no. So that's what those numbers mean. Okay. So as of right now, cities need to get 2/3, so we're pretty far below the threshold needed for success. But let's go to the next slide. So here is when we said, well, would you vote for the bond if you knew that it was going to do these projects? So we actually prioritize them from most popular to least popular. And you'll see, parks and open spaces, health and safety, new parks, skate parks. Shockingly, that one was higher than I thought it was going to be. Roads, deferred maintenance projects. So all these are kind of, pretty strongly supported. And in fact, a lot of the times you take a look at that orange and the green on the right-hand side, which is the less likely component, to determine, is there a project that your community hates, right? And so far, this first page, no, everyone's pretty cool with the projects that were thrown out there. Okay, next page.
Hey, Greg, real quick, I just want to mention that the items that you surveyed that were reflected on the slide were all items that this subcommittee reviewed. So just making that connection between those items that you surveyed and the subcommittee, whereas these are the kind of the list of items that the subcommittee discussed.
Yeah, correct. Okay, so then you can see the next one still. We're getting, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Greg, can we just go back?
Yep.
I have a question about the second from the top item, and then the, where is it? We don't really call it out. Cities, parks, open spaces, health, safety, and security. Let me look at it again, sorry. Civic Center. So we didn't call out police station. Is that correct? And do you consider it, sorry, but do you consider it really, I guess it's because it's not really spelled out in the second one. It's not called out as a building or a civic, it's just safety and security. So I'm just wondering what the logic was behind that. And I'm still on page 5, sorry. That's
yeah, but okay, so you're saying, so when we call it health, safety, and security, to me, that's almost like a general term. So a lot of times when you ask some of these survey questions, you're figuring out a specific project, but also you're asking how do they respond to just a general statement, maybe about a specific project, right? So
okay.
if I was to read health, safety, and security, that would not mean to me police station. That would just mean like, what's a safety and security improvement? Oh, to me, it's kind of roads, right? So while we say roads, you're also just kind of health and safety. It's just a general term.
Okay, but we're staying more general on this slide.
Well, yeah, because if you go to the next slide where we actually spell out, civic center and police station, you'll see when you get really specific on some of these, you lose support. So go to the next one.
Gotcha. So no, I just was trying to figure out how we go from the results on this slide and then how we interpret them in the next slide. So that's helpful.
Yeah, no. So how it's generally interpreted is what stands out to me is when you kind of speak in more general terms, you get more support, right? So, if you were to do a bond in the future, rather than say we're going to modernize and renovate the civic center facilities, including the city hall and the police station, you're probably better off just saying modernize and renovate city facilities.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Right.
Great.
Okay. So if you see here, it's almost like kind of the more specific you get. Oh, sorry. What's up?
I said I was asking so Lieutenant Parker doesn't have to. Sorry. That answers my question. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. And so, but if you see these projects here, that it's the orange and the green on that last one, we talk about City Hall and the police station, right? You can see there's a lot of negativity with that one. So I know you're 33% negative when you spell it out like that.
Okay.
Once again, if you just mention, safety improvements, or you mention just renovation stuff, you have higher support, which doesn't surprise me, because normally when you communicate with voters, it's the voter understands just general terms. Hey, we want money just to kind of fix up things, and the average voter is probably thinking, well, what affects me personally? Right. And it's like, okay, like parks, I like parks, grandmas to young moms like parks. When you talk about civic center, if you're to ask me personally, Greg, would you spend money to fix up City Hall? My first thing I'd say is, I don't even know where City Hall is. Right. And then number two, the police station, I'd be like, now where's the police station? Oh yeah. Whatever. If you would have probably said, fix up calling times for 911, people would be more all over that than maybe the police station. So I'm not saying that you can't do these projects, but it's just the way that you craft the wording. Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay. Next page. Page 7.
One more, Mike.
One more. Okay, so here's when we tell people that there's a cost to bonds. A lot of people think bonds are free. Say, hey, would you be more likely, less likely to vote for it if you knew it's going to cost you $60 or $50 or 45? So we go in that order, and you can see that there is there's a mental voter threshold. When you're talking 60, it's like, okay, 49%. You include the lien, yes. All right, we're at 52. That's not going to get us there. $50 just by dropping it $10. Okay, we gain an extra 4 to 5. And then when we go below $50, and for whatever reason, this is always like the magic sweet spot is below $50. Don't ask me why. It probably has to do with like the whole $49.99, has to do with the whole $19.99 instead of saying $20 or $50. For whatever reason, when you go below 50, support dramatically goes up. Okay. So, tax rate, if you're going to do a bond below $50, I think you'd do fine. But the most important question is the next one. So let's go to the next page. So this is where we ask the question again. We say, well, hey, now that you've heard all this information, would you vote yes? Would you vote no? And what makes your community unique compared to a lot of others is that support actually went up a decent amount. Okay. You're going up from 51.6 to 57.5. I mean, you went up 6 percentage points there. Your lean yes is still 3.3. The undecided 3.3. Lean no 3.3. So I mean, it's not like you're 70%, but you're probably low 60s. This is with voters probably thinking the $60 tax rate. This is with voters hearing, police station, city. There's a bunch of things. Could you do a bond in November of 2024? No, March of 2024? No. Okay. November of 2024, is it a possibility? It is, as long as you have the tax rate below $50, and as long as you have phrased the projects the right way and you get the right people on board. Okay. Any questions so far on bond?
I do have a question, if I may.
Okay.
So we're talking about bonds, we're talking about 50% of the votes, correct? But we're talking about sales tax, we're talking about.
Bonds are 67%.
Bonds are 2/3, sales tax are 50% plus 1.
I knew that there was a wrinkle there, and that was my concern. Okay.
So Greg,
right.
I have a question with this,
Yep.
just going to where we're at right now. As a bond, would you take it on right now for Cloverdale?
Would I do a bond in Cloverdale right now?
No, for November 24, like you're saying.
I would strongly consider it.
Okay.
You're not a slam dunk for sure. I mean, for sure you're not a slam dunk, yes. But you're also not dead in the water, right? You could massage your tax rate, because if you're gonna massage your tax rate, it's gonna make your bond amount lower, which is going to make people maybe feel a little bit more warmer and fuzzier. I think it's going to be close. Okay. once again, a lot of it depends on what you want to use the bond measure for. If you want to, if you're saying, hey, we're going to do a bond and fix up city hall and a police station, I think you're going to lose. If you said we're going to do a bond, we're going to fix up all the stuff and tuck in a modernization of the police station, yeah, I think that could win. But if your whole focus is to do a $25 million police station, and that's not going to win.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Next page. Okay, so this is where we talked about doing the sales tax. Talked about, would you vote yes? 10.5 million additional revenue, 0.75% to local sales. You can see this was like, whoa, slow down there. 41% said yes, 3% lean yes, 5% undecided, 3% lean no, 49% no. So right out of the gate, people are freaked out a little bit by that one. But that's a lot of the reason for that is just because when you talk about sales tax, 0.75% local sales tax rep, it confuses people a little bit. And people already are like, man, when you think of taxes, going to the store, going to the restaurant, that's what people think about. So it hits home a little bit closer, even though the bond is probably more expensive to them. The sales tax freaks them out a little bit. Okay. Next page. This is 0.75%. So if you go to 0.5%, you can see a big drop in the no and a little bit higher pop of yes. Right now, you're sitting there like, oh, we're pretty close to that 50% mark now, right? If you just go up 0.5%. And then the next page, you can see when you just go 0.25% joint, right, that it shows right there, that's a winner. Okay, so is there a way to, maybe get that 0.5% and, have to see with the law when it comes to, can you make it 0.49? I have no idea. But I think you can pass the sales tax measure, no matter what, at probably that 0.25%, which is going to generate those funds. The question is, can you increase it a little bit more so that you're not just leaving money on the table? Okay. Next page. And this is an interesting one. Let's see. So if both the sales tax, that's on. Let me scroll that down. So this is now just talking about the. Oh no, go back. Sorry. Yeah. So this is. I just have to enlarge it on my device here. So now we talked about the sales tax. Would you vote or would you vote no? You can see that the more information that you gave these guys, and you talked about lowering the tax rate, just their initial gut reaction was no to hearing the sales tax, right? But then when you broke it down to different levels and you educate them a little bit more that there's different ways to kind of scramble that egg, your percent goes up dramatically, okay? So when it comes to the two options, I think a sales tax November 2024 is a winner. You just got to find the appropriate percent that you want to do and find out what you actually want to fund with that. Do you want to include some additional, money for, let's just call it general fund purposes, right? Do you want to dump it all into facility projects? That's up for you guys to decide. But the good news, as I said, is that the sales tax looks positive. Going back to the bond, I've always said, I said this at your first meeting, there's a bond will pass in a community no matter what. It's just finding out what is the appropriate amount and rate in projects. Because if you said, hey, we're going to do a 2/3 bond, it's going to cost you, $3. Well, of course, someone's going to vote yes on that thing, right? But it's finding that right balance between figuring out how much this is going to generate from the sales tax and what I think a bond would work for you guys. And then you take those numbers and then you figure out, okay, well, what could this potentially fund? Because you may say, man, all I want is this police station. The police station is 23 million. Well, I'm going to say, well, it's not going to get you there. Between the sales tax and the bond, it's only going to generate a blank amount. So now do you still want to, do the police station and come out of, general fund dollars, take out a loan for it? Or are you going to say, you know what, I'd rather have all these other things forget the police station, and let's do all this other stuff. We'll have the bond amount will be a lot lower. We can get some money to the general fund through all this other stuff. So to me, those are the conversations that you're going to need to have in the next, 3, 4, 5 months. But once again, the good news is that there's nothing that is telling me forget about it. We're wasting our time. Okay. Questions?
The sales tax sunset,
Oh, yeah,
is that part of the conversation?
The length of time on
Yeah.
it. Okay. Greg, what is the length of time on the sales tax?
Hold on. Go back to that previous. Go back. Okay, this one right here. I was like, nope. Go to the page. Let me see. What's page 12 look like right now? Page 13. There we go. So before I answer that question, I thought there was a missing page here. So the one thing, so when we talked about, can you do both on the ballot at the same time? Okay. And so we said, well, would you, so the way to take a look at this page is you add up both measures and you kind of put them together. So it's like, well, if they're both on the ballot at the same time, you got 34.6, you're almost right at that 50% mark. The bond measure, only the bond, in both measures, you can kind of see you're at over 50% there. So the people that were surveyed here, these are generally your higher propensity voters. So this is not your casual voter. Your casual voter is going to give you an extra 5+ percentage points as opposed to your high propensity voter in Cloverdale. Okay. And so that's also something to consider is, do you want to do both on the ballot at the same time? Do you just want to pick one? And as I said, this is part of that 4 to 5 months where you guys got to say, okay, what do we really want to do in the city right now? We have our two options. We know the sales tax is going to be a winner. The bond's going to be close. It can win if we, as I said, have the right tax rate with the right project. So how long does the sales tax 0.25%? I think we set it up as like 25 years, is what we initially had it as. But I'll have to triple check it. It was one of my original presentations that I did for you guys like 5 months ago, 6 months ago.
So question, Greg, I know we're more than likely talking about November 2024, but if you could, talk about the sales tax going on the 2024 ballot in the environment of the fire tax that's going to hit the ballot in March, and then I think it's going to be the childcare or mental health initiative that's going to hit in 2024 in November, and the other sales tax renewals. I was wondering if you looked at, because I know that Sonoma County, other cities that have additional sales taxes are bumping up against the maximum, and so it's kind of two questions: is what's the advantage of going ahead and putting a sales tax on the local ballot in light of the fact that we may lose that margin if we don't act? And then secondly, what is the impact of the other sales tax measures that are, being floated in both March and November in light of, our chances, how they would affect our chances in November of 2024?
So I'm not nervous about competing tax measures in November of 2024. November 24 is so busy. And it's just like, I'm sorry.
In for a pound at some point. So
Say that again.
In for a penny, in for a pound at some point on that ballot. It's going to be crowded. Just going to be crowded.
It's going to be everything. Yeah, November 2024 is going to be crowded with everything. Okay. From statewide measures.
Yeah, that's going to increase voter participation more than likely. But at one point, at what point does the ballot become? Do people just become numb to it and don't vote in the lower part of the ticket? Or does it actually result in activating the, a bigger chunk of potential voters?
Both.
Okay.
So, So what happens is in March elections, you rarely have what's it called? The undervote, right? The undervote is when someone votes for presidential primary, they vote for the supervisor, right, and then they vote on everything because there's like 8 things to vote on. They finish it off. Okay. The November ballot, there's like 17 pages of stuff. Okay. And so what typically happens is in November presidential elections, you have anywhere from 5 to 9% of your voters will vote president, this, they're like, what is this commissioner, state commissioner, judge? Like, what is
State judges, who cares, right?
right? Appellate, all the, and they won't make it. And that's why you'll see that there's this undervote where people, they start it and they vote on that and then they get lazy and then they say, I don't know anything about this, so I'm not even going to vote on it. Okay. The other side, though, is you're going to have another big chunk of voters who normally don't come out to vote in a primary election because they just don't care. But for whatever reason, they think it's their civic duty to vote in the presidential election. And these people, they want their sticker. They want to be able to tell all the friends all the things they voted on, and they will make it to the end. And those voters that don't vote in March, but vote in November and make it to the end, those are big friends of municipalities. Meaning, these are people that they don't really know that much about what's going on. They don't understand voting. They don't understand taxes. And they typically vote yes on everything. Okay. So the power of the November election is you get that voter, and that voter is normally what makes conservative, cities, conservative rec and park, conservative schools win. If you're a conservative community, you almost always go in a November presidential election because you need those slacker voters that represent 25 to 30% of your voter base. You need these guys to show up.
Slacker.
Okay.
Okay, those slackers are probably gonna show up to the skate park, Greg. That's what
Yeah. No, I mean, those are your parent voters. Those are your seniors are going to vote no matter what. Right. And so what you need is that group to kind of outweigh the senior conservative vote. And normally it does. Okay. So in the case of other sales tax matters, because I know the county's doing, I believe Sonoma County's doing one. Mm-hmm. My friend's working on it. And so when it comes to, are they going to juice up their sales tax? No, if you went full on max out your tax rate for the sales tax in the county, there's some weird calculation on someone gets more than the other. But as long as we kind of stay below that 0.5%, you guys are, in my opinion, you're safe to do whatever you want to do in November.
Awesome.
Okay.
Better news than I was expecting.
Mike, there's one last slide.
Now the next slide is just conclusions. I just said it right there, which is, I think you guys should continue to go down the path. You're not telling anyone you're doing a bond, you're doing a sales tax measure, but I think now it's the time to let's find out what I need to run a calculation on my end to tell you how much I think I can generate for you and what I think is a realistic approach on how much you can actually access with a winning bond and a winning sales tax. And then you're going to have to take those numbers, go back to what you can fund with those numbers, and then that's where the decisions are going to have to take place, right? Because if you had a project that's $50 million, well, guess what? You got to take that project off the list because you can't afford it, right? So it just turns into what can you afford? What's important to you guys? We say, man, I wish I could get it all, but I got to live within my budget, and my budget says this. And so maybe it's like, hey, let's just get a skate park and fix this one kind of park and fix our roads, and we'll call that a day. If that's what you guys want to do, awesome, right? Or you can say, you know what, let's give it the old college try. Let's take everything out and let's go for that police station. I don't know. That's up to you guys to decide what you want to do. I can just provide you the numbers and tell you if I think something's going to realistically win or not.
I have another follow-up question. So, I'm pleasantly, I'm encouraged because I figured our numbers were pretty strong, and I think that the disconnect with voters is that, yeah, they haven't been in the police station. They don't realize what a public safety emergency this is. So I think that kind of one of the things that we have to consider is how much work we're willing to do, what we're willing to fight for. But also, you know, I think it's not up to you, Greg, but what I'm gonna wanna hear from staff is like, well, we're not gonna be able to float a bond to pay for the police station. But we could float a bond that addresses our infrastructure problem and gives us enough for a local match to go out for a USDA loan, to go out for grant money. So I guess that, like, in the future and conversations that we'll probably have with a larger council, and in light of our, current budget situation, I guess that's kind of that's probably what the conversation is gonna be centered around. And that's where my questions are going to be, because I don't think I just think it's a tough reality. I mean, if we went door to door and really explained to people what the situation is with the police department, it would be a huge investment of time and energy, and it may not even reap the rewards, even though, like, we understand how important this is. We understand that City Hall is falling apart. We understand that the police station is falling apart. But, again, it's like, yeah, people go to their parks and they drive on the roads. They don't even know where City Hall is. So, and they don't really have an understanding of how important it is, especially in light of like the 2017 and the 2019 fires. I mean, they just, they weren't in the room. So, what's the cost benefit of really fighting for that? Or do we really look at this bonding as the starting point for the local match? And that's what we're going to have the conversation about internally. But yeah, you hit on the main points, Greg. It's encouraging because it's not insurmountable. This is doable.
Correct.
So
That's all I got. All right.
I guess we should talk next steps, Greg, with
Yeah.
you. Let's just say, if we all decided, we want to put something on March, let's go worst case scenario.
You can't do the sales tax in March. It has to be on city council dates.
November. Okay, so when do you need to give answers to get this rolling with what we decided to do?
We have November of 2024 is so far away. So in my world, it is. In my world. So I mean, I would assume that no matter what I'm probably gonna run those number calculations for you to determine how much this is gonna. So I'll give you guys the full details. Okay. And this is when I realistically think you can get your money, in this time frame. I can get that to you, next month, and then you let me know by February, March if you guys want to go for it in November.
Perfect.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I just want to say, Chair, just thank Greg for obviously the survey work, and I know we should get an invoice for that, right? But also just for joining the subcommittee meeting today on relative short notice. For some reason, your emails get stuck in our spam, so we got to figure that out. But I want to appreciate the fact that you jumped on and gave us the overview of the PowerPoint and coordinate you on maybe early January. We do a presentation to the full council with details.
And that's fine. Yeah. And once again, I quit. I immediately ran from the car to get in here. It looks like I pulled a sweatshirt out of Todd's closet. So,
Hey, come on, we're going out.
all right, I'm out of here. See you guys.
When we're going for our slacker voters, Greg, and we're going door to door, that's what you're gonna bring with you, so.
Right.
Deal. See ya.
All right, thank you.
All right, Alex, did you have anything on that? You're on mute there.
No, I guess just the one thing to keep in mind is there's a ballot measure that the state is putting on the November ballot that would lower the threshold to pass a bond from the 2/3 down to 55%, like a school district needs. So that might, no guarantee that it will pass or not.
It's retroactive, right, Alex?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just one thing to another factor in your decision making.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never worked on bond.
That would be great. The door to door is real.
Oh, yeah. What is it?
More than a campaign. You go door to door and you bang, you phone tree and it's. It's not easy. It's a lot of-
Yeah.
You did two here with Greg.
Just like you falling into the creek, it has to happen. Doesn't work, police departments don't work that. Yeah, that's where we're. Yeah, and unfortunately, it's like we're seeing Windsor is in the same position. They have one earthquake, their whole civic, their whole civic building is just, it will pancake in a, small earthquake, so it's like.
It's 60 years newer than yours.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it needs to happen.
Do you have any other preference for which one goes next?
If we could proceed with the rent control, this is with Alex.
Okay.
Wait.
Let's go with that.
Okay, well, thank you, Chair and Madam Vice Chair, that this item was generated in part by a member of the community that came up under public comments to council, kind of pointing direction at the existing municipal code section 5.36, which provides for rent control in mobile home parks. The underlying ordinance that established that code section was adopted in 1986. The ordinance calls for appointment of a oversight board that oversees increases in requested rates in rental rates at mobile home parks. And it's that board that would be responsible for approving any kind of rent space increase, but otherwise rent increases would be prohibited under the municipal code. So there is on the books a rent control in mobile home parks. Based on our best effort to review the background as to whether this ordinance was implemented, we found no records that reflect that a board was appointed, a rent control board, or that the ordinance was implemented. In light of the comments that were made, that kind of seeking guidance on rent control within mobile home parks, in conducting this review, it was determined that the current ordinance really is subject to being updated and amended. The city attorney did a review. One of the things that the ordinance really doesn't provide for is any type of regular rate increase related to inflationary costs associated with operating and maintaining a mobile home park. We've seen in other jurisdictions that, and particularly throughout Sonoma County, they have a pretty well-tested process where rate increases are allowed on an annual basis, subject to or upon publishing the annual consumer price index. Often what comes into play during that discussion is what is the maximum rate increase that would be permitted, and either kind of defaulting to whatever the level of the consumer price index is, or putting some kind of ceiling on the rate of increase. As we know, mobile home parks do serve as a location for affordable housing, many of which are seniors or low-income residents. So it's one of the last bastions of affordable housing that we have available in our community. The gentleman that had brought this to our attention has been pretty steadfast in his correspondence with the city because his mother lives in one of our mobile home parks and he's concerned about future rate increases. So I think this is an opportunity for us to kind of look at the existing ordinance or the existing municipal code, which asked Alex to do, and Alex provided this memo, which kind of outlines really kind of two options for council. Is one, given the kind of what I view as some of the more difficult provisions within the existing code to implement, appointing a board, having that board oversee rate increases, may be kind of difficult to try to re-implement. Whereas the other option would be to repeal and replace with a new ordinance. And so we're really kind of seeking, well, part of the memo is to give you a background on the existing municipal code, but also to seek your direction and recommendation as to how we may want to proceed. From staff's perspective, a number of cities in Sonoma County have kind of followed the model that's set by Sonoma County. They actually work with Sonoma County on some elements in terms of, if there's an appeal, if there's some kind of change in ownership of the mobile home park to help settle some of those more contentious issues. And so I think it's an opportunity for the city staff to update the ordinance or kind of reflect current legal thinking, but also process and try to ensure that park owners also have a reasonable rate of return. So putting in place a mechanism that provides for rate increases, but doing so in a way that enables residents to kind of manage those increases in a reasonable way. So I'll kind of pause there. And Alex, is there anything you want to?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, I guess sort of as a higher level question is, does the city council want, mobile home rent control? Like if they do, then I think the path, Dave and I completely agree, is repeal and replace the current ordinance with something that, is similar to other agencies, minimizes burden for the city by having those annual set increases that are allowed. And we could prepare an ordinance for the council to consider and leave blank the amount of the increase for the council to debate and talk about, what that level would be. Or the alternative is sort of what the status quo is now, is there's one on the books, but it's not enforced, it's not followed. And that just leads to confusion. So if the council doesn't want to move forward with rent control, we should repeal that, just to avoid, sending mixed messages or creating confusion among the public and park owners.
So, yeah, this is an issue, and I'm sure Alex has seen those throughout Sonoma County and probably, most of California, because I think one of the reason that this is coming up now is that owners are aging out. I mean, I think that actually the acquisition of Soda Springs Ranch is kind of a reflection of this, as well as that property became available because the owners aged out and the kids, wanted to dispose of it. And I think that that's what's happening with a lot of these mobile home parks. This was seen as a really safe place to park your money. And those folks are retiring and they're either selling or handing it over to people who, want to, get their most out of their investment. So I think it's something that's really, it's happening. And we're talking about this at Cal Cities. We're talking about this at the Sonoma County legislative committee as well, because I think, all of our cities are sort of facing this. And the fact is that in Cloverdale and in so many other cities throughout Sonoma County, this is our de facto affordable housing. And so there is an interest and appetite to protect it. I mean, and I appreciate your point, Alex, is that we have a piece of, we have ordinance that is, it's woefully out of date and does not address it. And we need to I think we need to take action on it. So, I mean, I'm supporting that second option, because I think that's the direction that we need to go in. I also think that it's in our interest administratively, one, to be in, I mean, we don't have to be in lockstep with the county and other cities, but we need to be predictable. We're part of this, larger community. And I think that consistency is a good thing. And, secondly, having that rental board, that's administrative for a city our size. That's just silly. I mean, I think that they met well in 1986, but it's just administratively, it's a bigger expense than an investment in time and resources than we really need to take on. It's very simple. If we tie this to the CPI, I think that's going to be fair. So I'd like to see us, go ahead and recommend to the full council option 2, as you kind of defined it in the staff report.
Comments on that? You said that perfectly, but I would say somebody repeat it.
I guess next steps, would be, kind of two processes. One, we could bring it to council kind of as a check-in and get concurrence to move forward with repealing and.
Got an amend, Alex, got an amend.
And the minute, yeah.
and prepare for adoption of a new ordinance, which we would do really in one step, right, Alex?
Yeah, and yeah, all in one step. And then I think for that check-in with council, we would maybe bring also a chart so you can see what the rates are that other cities in Sonoma County, maybe Mendocino County are using. Some are 4%, some are 3%, some are, up to 75%, just so you have a sense of what's out there and then decide on that so that we can incorporate it into the draft of the ordinance that the council considers.
Use other market rate, rental rate increases in the particular municipality to analyze those, put them beside these numbers, or is that something you might do, or?
Yeah, so in Sonoma County, when they, a lot of cities in Sonoma County have updated theirs recently, so that information's out there, sort of what everyone is doing. I know when Windsor, I guess at this point it's already a year ago, but updated theirs, like they had information on what are all the other cities doing, and they're not all exact, but they're somewhat in a similar range.
We can certainly provide the table identifying the kind of different rate of increase provisions and bring that forward. Again, seeking direction from council, so.
But I was kind of wondering, do you ever, for the mobile home parks, do you ever look at like apartment rents or house rent in rate average increases per se? I'm just wondering if that's ever part of the number crunching.
No, I mean, usually it's just a flat, you pick what you think is a good policy as fair. The park owners are entitled to a fair and reasonable return. What our ordinance would say, and how most of these ordinances are set up, is like, we assume that the year before we adopted our ordinance, you were making a fair and reasonable return when you got to choose what your rate was and do all of that. So you'll have to, you have the burden of showing that wasn't the case. And if for some reason, there's still a process for them to apply for a greater increase if they need one to achieve a fair and reasonable return. But the burden is on them to show, they have to open up their books and show, like, I had a huge cost this, there was a huge, sewer problem I had to fix, or I had 50 tenants who didn't pay their rent that year or something. It changes sort of the burden on them to show why they need it.
Yeah, you hit on one of the other notes I wrote to myself, is that this isn't gonna go away. This is just, we're gonna be dealing with this. Thank you.
So what I worry about, Alex, and I mentioned it to David and Kevin this morning, is the financial burden on the city.
Yeah.
If we're subbing it out to a county person or somebody to hold these hearings and do all this information gathering.
Yeah.
So we need to have something in place for that to cover it.
So we can charge an administrative fee to recover our costs. The one thing to be aware of, though, for that is state law for mobile home parks does give park owners the right to pass along 50% of that cost to their residents, which is fairly common in cities and towns that have this kind of fee. But it becomes a question for the council of, what do I want to eat any of the costs in the general fund? Do you want to do it? You could also, the fee could just be a fee. If you apply for your increase, you have to pay the fee, and if you're successful and get your, you win and you're able to increase your rates even higher, like, you can incorporate your money and add that on or something, but put the burden on the property owner to pay that fee. But that's another reason, Mayor, why the idea of the board is so, in that sort of no rate increase would be such a burden, because you'd have every park every year applying, whereas this way it's sort of a unusual circumstances. I can speak, I know Windsor's ordinance fairly well, like, no one's ever applied, it's not something that happens very often, because park owners don't want to go through the hassle. They don't maybe want to open up their books or whatever. And so it's not something that happens very frequently. And we could have a fee that they have to pay if they applied to cover our costs.
So, yeah, well, just one more follow-up question. The Housing Commission is supposed to do an annual inspection of these parks, if that apparently doesn't happen either, Alex. So if we charged a fee, could that be, is that a piece that's covered, or how does that fold into what we're talking about?
Yeah, so, you know, kind of think of this ordinance really as rent control that's just specific to mobile homes.
Okay,
The question that you're asking about is about kind of oversight and responsibility for its like health and safety provisions. And so
you do consider it's a completely separate issue.
it really is. And mobile home parks are regulated under state regulations by housing and community development. So the city has no responsibility for performing any inspections. Other than, you know, maybe the master water connection or your sewer connection. But in terms of any building or health and safety improvements, the city really doesn't have a role.
But if HCD finds an issue and then the owner is forced to do a repair, then they would have the opportunity to go back and increase rates, and that's where it would affect this.
Right, they would have to do a rate, or they would have to submit the paperwork to do a request.
Okay.
The city council could opt
You do
to.
understand that this is really like dark science here.
Right. Council can go through a process to take over, and be responsible for inspections.
I don't think that's something that
Yeah.
we would be interested in pursuing, but yeah, but I just wanted to. I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to. Certainly says, yeah, so, but that is where those two issues.
Right, intersect.
Intersect, yeah,
Yeah,
that's what
absolutely.
I just want to make sure I
Yeah.
had it there in my mind. I didn't know I was gonna have to know this a couple of months ago, and now here we are.
And like, if we did oversee the inspection process, we'd see a lot more rate increase
Right,
requests.
right,
Probably, yeah.
okay, okay.
Just surmising.
I think you give them clear direction.
Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
okay.
Anything else?
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Have a good rest of the day, everyone.
Well, dude. Alright. Any others in order? Doesn't matter. All right, let's just go to number one.
You want-
Domain change.
All right, well, I'll turn this over to Mike. Mike is, he's enjoyed, challenging IT issues. He's been working on our website quite a bit. But there's a new law that is requiring, the cities to, change their domain from, you know, whatever it might be to .gov or .gov. So Mike, I'll kind of leave it there, and if you want to give an overview of this process.
Yeah, so this is actually something that I was looking at prior to that rule or that law getting into effect. It doesn't go into effect for a few years. So I was actually trying to get us ahead of the curve, but I think a few other cities were doing that. So as you can see in your notes, the administrative office that basically grants these requests for a .gov has frozen their website. And so when I was trying to get us ahead of, like I said, ahead of the curve, we're now gonna have to wait until the new year when we'll start accepting new requests in January 2024. But ultimately, you can see in your packet, I'm not sure what their new registration process will be. It seems like they're trying to streamline that a bit, but prior they had us basically fill out an application, which I had already filled out and just wanted to get some signatures today, but won't be able to accomplish that. So basically today is just kind of more of a let you know that this is where we're going to be heading, to probably most likely Cloverdale.gov. Some other cities have already done that in Sonoma County. They went through the old process, so we'll probably be one of the first cities spearheading that. It is one of my goals to have it finalized in 2024. As soon as they give us the domain name, I'll create a plan to be strategic about how we shift over, because it's not just as simple as we're .gov now, because that means all of our emails will change, all of our passwords to every software we use, and every department uses a ton of different software. We'll have to set up, every user will have to have new credentials for basically everything. So new business cards, there's some cost to it. It is going to be a headache. I did it when I was in Santa Rosa when they shifted from the CA dot or CI dot Clover, .ca .us. But it will be nice once it's all said and done when we're Cloverdale.gov, or it'll be, M Maloney at Cloverdale.gov versus having to say all the other the longer nomenclature that we have now. So as of right now, because of their we were just recently notified that they're closing their website till January. I don't have much of an update for now, but you'll definitely hear more about this in 2024 about how we're going to strategically switch over. So unless you have any questions or anything, or just kind of an update at this point, because unfortunately we can't move forward.
And it may be, since there are a number of other, well, this system we build is applicable to California, but if there are other cities of Cloverdale, what you may see the domain would be cloverdale.ca.gov. So it ends up not being all that much shorter than ci.cloverdale.ca.us, but at least Cloverdale.gov or Cloverdale.ca.gov is a little easier.
Get in there and get it done.
Get it done.
First come, first served.
Get in there. Let's get it done. No, this is 20 years too late, but could be. Also, will we be able to use a redirect like just in the meantime?
Yeah. And typically that's what I've seen cities do, and that's what I'm familiar with. For about 6 months, all of our emails, so if you email my old email address, it'll just redirect to the new one. Same with the website. If you go to cloverdale.net, it'll redirect to the new one. And we'll probably put a tagline on there or something that this website will officially expire on this date, things like that. So that we want to be as transparent about it as possible, but as part of the transition. And typically we will make that an official transition at midnight, things like that. So, there's less traffic on the site, things like that. But we will definitely make sure to market and do some outreach on that transition. So nobody's coming.
With like November 2024 or yeah. All right.
Everyone good? Next one's the youth programming grant proposal.
Thank you, Mayor. We received correspondence from Amy Lovato, who is the board president for the Cloverdale Performing Arts Center. It's included in your packet, received on Tuesday, October 24th. It's what's referred to as a youth programming grant proposal for 2024. The letter in your packet indicates that the Cloverdale Performing Arts Center would like to establish a youth camp. I think this would be during the summer period, though they indicate that they'd like to fund both the summer and winter program, where these camps participate in bringing a play to the community, corresponding to their interest in establishing this program. They have asked for what they're referring to as a city grant of $20,000. So I view this as kind of a funding request from one of our nonprofit organizations. We did share with Ms. Lovato that this would be placed on the subcommittee today. I don't see her present, so I'm not sure if she could make it, but included in their packet was a draft youth program budget, which identifies the amount needed for the year of $20,925, but the ask is rounded to just 9,000 or just to 20,000. And so we wanted to kind of bring this forward as this request received, similar to the funding request by the History Center. My recommendation would be to package up this request along with the other nonprofit requests as part of a future budget discussion and budget workshop with council, where we may want to set kind of a funding level in total for nonprofits, and then look at how they want to allocate the funds to the various requesting agencies and nonprofits that we have in our community. But pause there. Happy to entertain any questions that you may have about this.
I'm happy to recommend it to the council for consideration. And I have to say that that program budget sheet that they submitted I'd love to see this as kind of the standard for all of the nonprofits, because they submitted it and they're speaking our language. It's broken down by program, by cost center, and so that you could really understand, it's like, where is the money going to? So, they did a very nice job in submitting, the supporting documentation. So, yeah, and of course, whether or not it's granted is up to the entire council, but they put together a very clear and compelling letter and an explanation of how the money is actually going to be spent. So I think we should, add it to our list for budget considerations. And they may want to also include options. I know that they're looking for us to, they're looking for the full 20, it looks like they're looking for the full 20,000 from the city. And I'm just wondering, any follow-up question would be, are there, other places where they could, use the, funding from the city as a local match, and then go out for additional funding for, if there's anything available like that for them. I just kind of want to get some more information.
Yeah, one thought I had that might be valuable for council to consider, and it'd be an interactive conversation with CPAC. They've identified both summer teen camp and winter teen camp. If council does support funding, maybe it's, one or the other. To, kind of looking at a way to, again, if there's support for funding, maybe there's more interest in a summer camp because it's the time
School.
when kids are out of school.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's gonna lead to different options.
Well, this is all gonna depend on your audit that you did in finance background and what our budget really shows, because if we're at a deficit of 800,000 plus,
Right.
this is.
We may not even have it.
Hard full stop for me.
Yeah, we may not even have it at all is the issue too. And then on the other hand, I know that it's an important part of our community fabric, especially and I like the idea of like, well, maybe we support the summer program, for when kids are out of school, but the holiday program also brings folks into the downtown and does have some economic development benefits. So, but if we absolutely don't have cash, we don't have the cash. I hate saying no to things, but we don't have the money, that's it. So, and then getting them that information, I think as soon as possible, so that they can go out for grant funding, I think is really important.
Fair Vice Chair, as an option, it's something I spoke with CPAC a while back. If we do have budget constraints, something I spoke with them at one point was collaborating with them. And that was prior to them submitting this, but was with recreation, often performing arts as part of that. And maybe we can do some kind of collaboration where it's really based on registration rather than this is how much it's going to cost to put on a program, but it's, you get X amount of kids registered, and that way we can kind of work with them as a collaborating entity, and it can be part of our recreation programming if we don't have the funding, or maybe that's part of it or something. I just wanted to throw that out as an option. That's something that we spoke with them and they seemed in favor. And then we got this, so maybe they're not as much anymore, but that was probably 6 months ago, so I'll reach out to them.
Good thinking though, and maybe the situation that we're in.
Right, I just don't want to hurt their programming, but if we can somehow find a way to collaborate, it's an option.
Good.
And I would just add that even if we do better than what we thought, you have to remember that we rolled a bunch of expenses from last year to this year, like for dog parks and things that we were looking on. So we just need to keep that in mind.
No, it's going to be a tough, and I think there's going to be a lot of hard no's, and it's difficult to say, because it's all things that we love. But I'm hoping it's better than I'm thinking.
It might be hard cheese.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do city hall closure. It's the easy one, make people happy.
There's a memo prepared by Susie Holmes, our finance director. This is identifying the finance director in particular is recommending closure of City Hall on November 22nd and 23rd. That corresponds to Wednesday and Thursday. 23rd is Thanksgiving, so it's the day before and the day of. As well as the week of the Christmas holiday, which is December 25th through 28th. This is a practice that we've done now for, I think it's going on 4 years. This in part is based on a couple of things. One, we have a number of staff that requests those days off, and we're often short-staffed. So it's a little bit of a staff morale issue. Because those that say that don't get denied, could be a happy case, but
Alcohol's not allowed to be on.
the other factor, in all seriousness, is public service and being available and open to the community for essential services. We find that during these periods of time, visitation to City Hall tends to be pretty much pretty slow, so we don't see real service impacts. But during this time, we do have all essential services available. Obviously, the police department works 24/7. The public works staff, non-city hall staff, while many of them will also be requesting various days and times off, they'll be at the public works director's discretion to schedule. They will be available for shut-offs and turn-ons as needed. And likewise, I know, speaking for myself, I'm available by phone or email. It's just really closure of City Hall in case of any significant issues or incidents or whatever Kevin and I are here to troubleshoot as needed. So what we're just seeking is your input and feedback, and if you concur and support this idea, we would notify council that this would be the plan, and obviously we'd put notices on the door. So I don't know, Susie, there's some financial elements, maybe you want to kind of address that.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't do it, then do we owe more vacation time, and as it's saved up and then increases happen, then it's worth more dollar wise. So there's that. There's also the benefit of not having utilities during the week, and
I don't think we need to.
yeah,
It's a free perk.
yeah.
It's we can offer a perk to employees and save some money on
You see your own vacation time, you see it for every.
That's what I think.
The one thing I would ask, and I don't know what you think, is things like water shutoffs during that time frame. If we're not available, let's not have those available to be done.
We don't do water shut-offs during December.
Yeah, it's pretty screwy. So,
Yeah.
No, we don't. I mean, but unless it's someone needed to have their water burned.
emergencies are always there. However,
Yeah.
if they're not able to walk in and pay a bill with cash like this morning, then I don't want to be able to shut them off.
But we'll have a note saying if you need anything to call this number, it'll be PD and.
Yeah, they're always.
Yeah. And we.
We'll
make
handle
sure-
it.
Make sure you get the corner of the building while you. Sure, the building's gonna cave in.
Hear that noise?
And we'll make sure that the billing gets done. That will happen during that period, but the person doing the billing can kind of do it on their own schedule, and payroll will get done. Payroll will be approved, everything will go through the bank.
Or
so-
to the door system.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's really a staffing benefit. We have a pretty small staff at City Hall, so we notice even when.
So then if you're doing that, then you have New Year's this Monday.
Yeah.
Right.
As well, so then we come back Tuesday the second.
Come back Tuesday.
Yeah.
Great.
Sounds reasonable.
Anything else? Still no attendees, so we'll move on to the next one, which is the budget at a glance.
Oh, are we gonna do E6?
Did I miss one?
E6
I don't have any
Oh,
six
there's
on mine.
always
on the
4, 5, 7. So you have parties.
wild parties.
Everyone party.
I was looking at the bunch of little.
Well, that'd be granted.
Because there wasn't a an item,
And then
this is an
it's
attachment.
Oh, that's what, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
it's my attachment.
No, I know.
It doesn't.
Okay, sorry, guys.
It's
E6, city responsible about parties and noise complaints.
Thank you, Mayor. This item was generated from, some complaints that were generated by the community, over the, I'll call it the Halloween weekend, or maybe the end of harvest weekend. There were, some fairly loud, party events that occurred on private property that generated, fairly significant noise late into the evening. And wanted to bring this forward, to talk about, what the process is, because what we heard, I think, is there's a desire for a noise ordinance. And while I don't necessarily disagree that a noise ordinance can be helpful, it's not the one all be all tool to addressing these kinds of activities. I think in large part there's kind of multiple ways in which the city can address these events. And it often starts with our police department response. And kind of as we typically do, enforcement at the lowest level is begin that conversation, communication with residents about the impact of the activity that's occurring and making a request that noise discontinue or the disturbance discontinue at a reasonable time. Kind of the typical thought is somewhere at say around 9 p.m. or at the very latest 10 p.m. is kind of a generally accepted time frame for kind of cutting off sound for amplified music. That's been consistent with our planning practice. I think it's fairly consistent with Friday Night Live, which we regulate through special events. So I think going forward, we need one a police presence to stay and advise when these events are happening that the activity is going to be discontinued and with a firm message at a certain time. There's certainly the ability, I think, under our code to write citations if necessary. But one of the options is to generate or develop a noise ordinance. Again, those tend to be difficult to enforce. You have to go out with the noise meter, kind of see where it is. It tends to be an infraction thing, so it doesn't mean that the activity is necessarily going to discontinue. But we wanted to put this on because we again know that the community, there's some community concerns. I received multiple emails. I'm sure you did, Mayor.
I have videos too. It's unbelievable, it really is.
Yeah, they were pretty extremely loud. And it seems like this maybe is a reoccurring theme. I view it as, it seems like it maybe is related to the end of harvest. Is what I'm thinking, and maybe it's Halloween, I'm not sure.
I think it might have been for this one particular day. However, there was one about a month ago, so I think it's starting to become an area thing.
Well, I was surprised that you said that because when I first saw the item and there's no PDF attachment, which got us off of our numbering system. I thought you were gonna bring up VRBOs or, people, party houses, because, and so without throwing anybody under the bus unnecessarily, was this disturbance actually at
I'll show you right
was it in a residential area or was it at a facility where you can rent in?
It was a private residence.
Okay, so it's in a private, it was in a private home, okay.
Yes.
There was two, there was one in Carmen and.
I'm working on it, so.
Yeah.
Because harvest was really late this year.
No, I'll show you, this is the video that person on River Road took
Oh, wow.
of the party from Railroad Avenue, which is. Now listen,
Whoa.
watch this.
Oh, I think I heard that.
That's from their house on River Road. And this is the party
I heard that.
on Railroad Avenue.
Wasn't that loud actually?
And this is what I'm getting at 11 o'clock night. Is
Yeah.
that, like, where the F are you? So it traveled perfect. You know?
Wow.
I did follow up with that, by the way, and talk to the managers. They're, I don't know if I should say anymore, but I was very firm and fair.
Okay.
And they understood and they're gonna follow up.
But they're,
Yes,
okay.
sitting on notice. So, from the previous one, I know I can see trends, and this would be a trend if we don't nip it in the bud.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I'm not still down, I have, working with a bar that someone complained about, somewhere.
One of the things I know works, and I think Chief Brigger. Yeah, I'm just going to keep no.
That's all we said.
The chief lieutenant. When I worked for the sheriff's office, we did, at the discretion of the officers going out. And I think that's better than having actual noise ordinance to have decibel meters and all that stuff to read, because then they can decide, but you set a time. I think, we talked about doing, permitting for any type of amplified or live band music, things like that, so that and the number of people that are going. That's the kind of stuff that I would be looking for, because I don't want it to be very specific. I want it to be kind of general, where it gives them discretion at the same time.
Yeah,
No, that makes sense.
we do regulate that when they rent a park.
Yeah,
Then
yeah.
That's in there,
That's
yeah,
it's
have
like-
music.
Was it a rented facility that's adjacent to a neighborhood, or is it a private home?
And what's
Yeah.
funny, if you go to the railroad station and you look south into the, into the trailer park, there's a lot there. It's owned by the same owner,
Yeah.
and that's where they just throw these huge parties right there in front of it.
But if I-
Basically along Boulevard.
I might bring their own, but yeah, but I think I did hear that, and it actually wasn't that loud from my house. I actually live closer.
Yeah,
and-
you do.
Yeah, so. But yeah, it's kind of part of the neighborhood. It's also part of the social network of the neighborhood. But if it really does become a health and safety issue. I mean, to me, I think our officers are so plugged into the neighborhood. They show up and people are like, oh yeah, here we go. That's,
Yeah, that is your cooperative.
Yeah.
They'll turn it down. Unfortunately, in this occasion, they turn it back up later.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, we just need to, but we do have provision in our municipal codes that are section 9.32050 for unruly gatherings on private property. And it talks about, particularly drinking alcohol, unreasonable noise. So it does, I think we have language within our code to be able to enforce. But in some cases where someone decides to disregard that, or request by our PD, we're just gonna have to take a firmer position.
And I think one of the things that I'm sure you're thinking about too is that in other areas in Sonoma County and maybe with the advent of social media, when these parties start getting established, it becomes a street party, that's when it gets out of control. And the city of Santa Rosa has really seen that. And with, I think that that's the motivation, is that we want to make sure that it does not get out of control to the point that it then becomes an attractive nuisance for people. The people who are, these are our local workers. These are our local, people who are out working to harvest, and they're probably having a party and blowing off some steam. And it's just like, those are the people who live in my neighborhood. My next door neighbor is a winemaker. It's like, these are the folks in my neighborhood. So.
But there has to be a level of
But there
respect somewhere.
There has to be, yeah, and I'm disappointed to hear that, they were asked to turn it down once and then it turned back up. So I think that that's kind of where we have to say, enough is enough, and you've been asked nicely once, and please don't make us make a rule for you. So I think it was timely to bring this up so that we're aware of it, because we have been happily immune to a lot of that road racing, party culture, and we don't want to see it take a hold. Because once it takes a hold, it's harder to get it back under control. So
I think the good thing is I didn't hear a lot of spillover impacts other than the excessive noise. So.
I didn't hear anything from my neighbors who were on Lake and, from my friends who were on Lake and, East, so it wasn't that bad. So they.
I think the direction of the speakers maybe.
It might have
They
been.
might have been
It
facing-
might have been going directly east, because I'm kind of northeast, we're kind of northeast, so it might have been, that direction.
Cause
but-
I had residents within Carmen complaining.
Yeah.
Well, because there was a separate party in Terman.
Well, I think it was because maybe the speakers. were
Oh
blasting
my
that night.
gosh, that's probably why. Okay, well, maybe a council member.
Well, if you think about it, Charmin backs up to the freeway on
Oh, yeah,
it, and so.
and the sounds all straight there.
Shot through that corridor.
Wow. But yeah, I think that that's a good thing to have been brought up, and we need to make sure that that doesn't, yeah, so is there a policy direction you're asking us to?
Well, I just wanted to talk a little bit about our, well, to bring it to the subcommittee. You know, they've received enough attention that I felt like it was important to raise the issue here. That we talk about it, and I think it's just more greater enforcement of our existing rules rather than what I
Do
heard.
we have anything for the size of parties, for amplified music? I know the amplified music, I know there's something, but I don't know.
Well, we do have the special event requirements. What it doesn't address is private parties. We could update those guidelines to give some parameters around private parties. So for instance, often see private events that exceed 50 people or than 100 people, or includes amplified music, so that, you know, almost like an amplified music permit.
Right.
Where that, you know, one, you can't have it unless you get a permit, and if you have it, then we're gonna put conditions around that, so.
Yeah, we can use our special event permit process. It's just like Chris said, they're typically on public property, that's what we use it for, but we could expand it, I mean.
I think we're going to have to, especially if these property owners aren't helping.
Well, and that's what
Twice is like,
wineries are private property, and they have events like this, and they're subject to regulation to event. You know, they're having, it's called a special event permit. So, you know, maybe we model it on that, if it's really gonna be that kind of scale.
Yeah, we already have something that pertains to special events on public property, so we can, what I hear is you'd like us to bring something forward for consideration, so we can do that. Maybe we, ultimately adopt it by resolution, and, you know, recommend to the council that they consider adopting special event.
I think we're all for a good party and have fun enjoying life.
Maybe you look at it too, is that if we have an issue with rentals or VRBOs, it could kind of apply in the same way. Because this is a private event on private property, and and if they have a party or something like that, that's a special event, and then they're all, so we're not, singling anybody out. We're saying if you're going to have a large event with a number of people and amplified music on private property, these are the guidelines.
Mhm.
And then if we do end up with VRBO issues, it's just the same rule. Does that make sense?
It does.
'Cause I like a party.
Right. We all do. You just.
Yeah,
My Sunday's kids, that was bad. I mean,
Yeah.
I've never said a party was too loud. Now I'm like, whoa. That
They
was
must have had, I didn't see the speakers, Lieutenant, but they must be bigger than the ones you have.
Anything's bigger than
Good
one.
line.
It's not offend him. Yeah.
So it's upgrading my.
Of these big butters.
Consider the challenge more.
Wrong direction. But yeah, I think you've got pretty good direction with that, so.
Still no public, so we'll move on to the next one. Finance budget update.
Okay, Mayor and Vice Chair, he asked us to bring forward or start to bring forward updates on the budget. And so a couple things. One, we mentioned earlier is that we're currently working on, and I say we, but largely our finance director is working on the fiscal year 22-23 budget, which ended June 30th twenty twenty-three, so just about 5 months ago or 4 months ago, depending on how you look at it. And we're trying to get that done as soon as possible so that we can have an audited fund balance for the current fiscal year. And did receive communication from our auditor, Terry Creek. We're really delighted to have Terry back. We're working on completion of 2 required reports, GASB, what's called GASB 68 and GASB 75. It's a GASB stands for Governmental Accounting Standards Board. Both of those deal with pension liability. GASB 68 is complete, and they're working on GASB 75, get that done, which will help our auditor to complete and do additional work on the towards completion of the audit for last fiscal year. I've expressed the desire to get a fund balance as quickly or as soon as possible, so that we can start running projections for our next fiscal year budget. And again, our plan is to bring forward a proposed 2-year budget, recognizing. So one of the things that our finance director prepared was, budget at a glance, really just to look at the current year budget and kind of high level points of what are your major fund accounts, which of course is the general fund, the sewer fund, gas tax, airport, and water fund. The water fund and water, sewer, and airport are also, basically what are referred to as your enterprise funds. So they're in the audit, you'll see they are looked at as really as separate business enterprises. And that's why we account for funds within those budgets so discreetly. But what we wanted to do is bring this forward just to give you, again, a snapshot of our revenues and expenditures for each of those major funds. It's again as a start to the work we're going to begin here on developing the next year budget. And we know there's going to be a lot of discussion around how do we address, what we've seen is this growth in expenses, but without necessarily the corresponding growth in revenue. We've seen, revenue, I think, kind of plateau to a certain extent, especially sales tax. We got up to, we got over $1 million in sales tax, and it seemed like it was, continued to grow, but it really is kind of moderated to more of the 2.5% annual growth. Property tax, fortunately, has still been a kind of a bright factor within our revenue. We've seen, somewhere around 5% growth in assessed valuation, and that's been helpful. So again, with the current rate of interest, property turnovers, I think, are going to start to slow. Already seeing that, and therefore, because with property ownership changeover slowing, I would expect we would see the increase in assessed valuation also decrease, because not as much activity and sales activity occurring. There's usually kind of a lag, so we won't probably really see that maybe not into next year, but maybe the second year. And so, but it's a headwind that we can expect to see, even though property tax revenue has been a bright spot in our overall budget. So again, what we're trying to achieve is one, this is kind of a starting point. I think Mayor requested this future agenda item, breaking down the budget and getting your direction and the subcommittee's direction on how do we want to bring discussions forward for each of the funds. I think it's critical we get that general fund number, and then we can kind of start bringing some analysis forward to the subcommittee. and then, you know, obviously there's your sewer fund and your, water fund. But then there's also, you know, we could spend some time just looking at, for example, within the general fund, our various revenue sources or even our various, you know, expenditures. So, and with that, I just wanted to pause. I want to say thank you to Suzie for putting this together. It's again, it's really just a snapshot of our budget, and as a reminder, we now on our website, we have access to OpenGov, which kind of functions. One is it's really our online budget, so anyone can go and, you know, really look at it. There's the stories to kind of give the big picture overview of the budget, but you can also review, you know, current expenditures as it relates to what's been budgeted. Don't necessarily see all the detail that we see, but that way, if there's questions from the community you want to look at, they can always call and ask. But most of our budget now is pretty much online, but you know, this was kind of a way to just give an easy snapshot of each of the major funds of your budget. So if there's anything you want to add.
No, I would say that this is a group effort. I didn't do this by myself. And then David both helped. So, but thank you for giving me credit. And I would just add on that, you know, our budget online does update every night at midnight. So it has the most current information. I think that's important. And then also, the audit, I know we're 5 months into it almost now, but we have to keep our books open through August because we're on a modified accrual basis. And so some of our payments come in August that are for June. And so we can't close our books until then. So really we're, you know, yeah, so just want to make you aware of that too, so you don't think that we were just sitting around.
And, you know, at a high level, like for instance, looking at the general fund, you see revenues, and there are some discrete categories there. So general taxes, license permits, intergovernmental revenues, charge for services, fines, miscellaneous revenue, and other revenue sources. Just starting at the top, general taxes, that's where under that category, there's property tax, sales tax, and TOT. Those are your three main revenue sources.
Right.
And what we've done internally is for each one of those, and we can, these are things that we can pull up on OpenGov and bring it to the subcommittee, is we look at actuals from the previous year for each of those, because we know what we received, say, in property tax revenue, what we received in sales tax revenue. And then for the next year, we, for instance, with sales tax, we have a sales tax consultant and that's doing forecasts on the overall economy, state economies, and state tax revenue. They'll produce, you know, kind of optimistic. There could be three scenarios, you know, kind of recession, optimistic, and kind of, you know, in the middle. And traditionally, yeah, most likely. So traditionally, we go with the most likely. We kind of double check it. Does this seem reasonable? Usually, it's a fairly modest rate of growth, and that's where that one revenue projection for sales tax, which would be rolled up into this general tax. Likewise,
Is there a utility tax in that as well?
the
And
utility
general
tax.
taxes?
I think so. Okay.
I probably should go on to.
I think utility using taxes.
Is it, and that's in general taxes?
Yeah, that's a good question. Where is
Okay, so it's property tax, sales tax.
There it is.
management-
it is utility using tax.
Yeah.
And then on intergovernmental revenues, what's the difference between, I'm sorry if I may ask.
No,
a question, because
I'm looking at the same thing with you.
I'm still trying to get this all straight in my head. So when we're looking at, for instance, like the ghost now that comes into effect in 2024, the current the current Go Sonoma, whatever it used to be called, and then also like the, what's one of the other ones, but basically, so. The parks sales that Measure M,
Mhm.
so what category are those in? Is that intergovernmental or is that miscellaneous?
Measure and part.
Measure M parks and then like the SCTA, Go Sonoma, well, what will be called,
Yeah.
what will be Go Sonoma.
So that's a great question. So, both of those funding sources aren't general fund revenues.
They are general fund.
Are not.
No, that's okay, but yes,
So-
which category? Which category?
So
are
this
those?
is, so these are all general fund.
Oh, sorry, you know what, you got me.
And so
So
where,
do you
where,
see those? That's in,
Budget doesn't
where do you
have,
see
it
those?
didn't break down the special revenue funds.
right, so,
You're right. Because it doesn't go into general fund money because it goes into.
it's special
It's
revenue,
special revenue.
but it's not in the general fund.
Okay.
So, for instance, in the budget, we have a specific fund called Measure in Parks. We also have Measure in Streets, which is
Right,
kind of
which-
confusing.
Which is what measured, which was DD on the ballot.
Right,
We call it-
right.
We call it Go Sonoma.
And we call it Measure in Streets.
Right.
Because we always have to do the Measure in report. So
But now we get to call it Go Sonoma.
Good.
those,
Better name.
when you look at this budget number here, on revenues,
Mhm.
it's not reflected in that fund revenue at all.
Okay,
It's accounted for entirely separate in its own fund.
okay.
And so that's something that, because like, for instance, on Measure in revenue, for parks.
Hmm.
We brought to council a discussion about how council would like those funds to be allocated. Council, when we said, we brought three scenarios. One was 100% staffing, 100% projects, or split it 50-50. Council said split it 50-50. So what we do, we put 50% of the Measure in revenue towards funding a staff position,
Mhm.
which in the past, we got about 50,000, we funded a part-time position. This year, when we got the increased revenue from Sonoma County through our agreement for maintaining River Park, we had enough to put Measure in with that funding to fund a full-time park position.
You're right.
So in that case, that position
That's the
isn't,
difficulty, because it's like, it tells you probably what, 98% of the story. But it's not the full story of how things
Right.
get funded. But I think that this is great, I love this.
But on the website, for sure, you can see Fund 214 is Measure and Parts, you can see how much we've actually received. How much we've.
I think that that's the thing that comes, especially since things are gonna be really tight. People are gonna say, I thought we got money from Sonoma County for streets and parks, where aren't, and so I'm asking that question, I imagine that other people are gonna ask that too.
yeah, I think the challenge for us is, there's all these funds.
Yeah.
How do we present it to council, break it down, in a way that makes sense and that also, gives you a picture that enables you to give us feedback on how those funds are being utilized. I mean, we've tended to bring those forward on an individual case by case basis. For example, with the parks, we said, well, we know Measure M, here's how you want to allocate it. So that's how we've been following that process. But those are things, for example, you could say, gosh, we just really want a parks position. We want to totally fund it out of this. This is what we're gonna do. And it's, and that could be, that's a policy direction. But that means, what I would say to that, for instance, is, well, that means we're gonna have less towards maintenance. And that some of those things are health and safety issues, which we're gonna then have to use general fund.
Right.
So, I could say, one of the things I'm always doing, or we're always talking about, is how do we get these expenses out of the general fund as much as we can?
As much as you can,
Right,
yeah.
right.
Well, and I think that's what's gonna shift with that too, because how that money can be spent and where it can be spent, I mean, I'm certainly not making any promises because it's not my money. but I know that more money is anticipated to go to the cities because the 101 widening has essentially been done and it is completed. So a lot of that transportation money, I mean, and it may end up being that we get such a small piece of the pie, it's not, but I was gonna
Go again.
yeah, exactly. So, so I think that, but I just, based on the numbers that they're projecting, it might be, you know, I think it's gotta be part of what we're then projecting, what we can do with that money.
Right, right.
Yeah.
No, it makes sense, and we certainly will try to look for opportunities and be able to present those to council so that, you know, here, if you do this, here's what what
Yeah.
the impact might be, or here's the benefit. And, you know, part of it is trying to find ways to fund staffing, and
Yeah.
staffing pretty much comes out of the general fund or water, wastewater enterprise, that, you know, depending on the role that the staff, the members performing, so trying to offset the general fund costs, like if we could use part of Scotia Sonoma to help fund part of our public works director who's working on those projects, or the
Right.
city, I mean, that would really help,
Because one of our,
but
yeah,
relieve some of the,
our biggest problem is the bandwidth to be able to work on those projects.
Right.
And that's a staffing problem. So, yeah, that's kind of, that was, you know, I'm cautiously optimistic there will do a little bit more there. And then, of course, that all of this is going to impact the discussion around sales tax and or bond initiative too, is that, do we want to, you know, we're going to have to do that backward engineering of going, okay, well, where do we want to go? And then what's the, you know, do we go for the sure thing, or do we go for something that we might have to push a little harder for and really, you know, really get the word out to the voters on? So it's all kind of tied together.
absolutely.
But I think, but this is I love this, and I you know, you guys have put this out before, but I just think it's so succinct and clear, and I think you should get all the credit, but no.
No, and that's perfectly fine, and that's what we want. I have some design ideas, maybe we make
I know.
this default or
I'm
something.
having trouble with
Pictures on the front, but, we,
I don't think this on the front either. It's like, maybe that should just be on the back, and let's, you know, don't bury the lead.
right, I think Susie in the past did, put some nice photos on the front and made it a little bit more attractive as a piece, but, again, this was a request,
Here.
and I think we can use, I don't want to say use, but this committee would be, really valuable for diving in on some of the, you know, if you want to actually look at those revenues, and break, you know, in Open Gov, and start looking at how we are going to be budgeting those, what amounts we're going to be budgeting going forward. We can kind of start that process with the subcommittee, if you think that, if you want to dive down to that level.
I think that we should,
I think
because
so,
of the depth that we're in, I think we should kind of get the ball rolling and be ahead of the game, so that we can be more knowledgeable for the rest of the council when the time comes. At least for the bigger items.
Yeah.
Your general fund, your water.
Yeah.
I mean, the airport fund is what it is, basically. You know, you look at that, it's not making or breaking the bank here. However, 5 minutes of time with it would be fine.
Sure, sure. So does it make sense, maybe next meeting, we start with the general fund. And either revenues or expenditures, if we have time, we'll tackle both, but kind of going through each one of these. And begin Susie's gonna be working on the budget calendar, and we'll bring that forward. So we can start getting dates on the calendar in 2024 for the budget workshop. You know, again, talking about what our budget goals are gonna be. And at least, you know, kind of start with the big picture and start drilling down, but this subcommittee can be starting to focus on some of the more details under the budget. And, you know, I think on the expenditure side, a big one is gonna be salaries and benefits. And, you know, that's gonna be a function of labor negotiation process. But the more you kind of understand what are the impacts of that on the overall budget, I think will be very informative.
Like I said, what does 1% mean?
Yeah,
Overall?
1% of the airport budget, I think, care less. It's really like what you brought up is a very good point, is that when we're talking about the big funds, then it's significant, but yeah, but we probably will get to the point where we still have to make very difficult choices about small percentages just in order to
Everyone will feel it.
get balanced, yeah.
And the airport fund matters too. It's its own enterprise,
Yeah.
but we've had now a decent history of subsidizing the airport fund. We've certainly looked for opportunities to try to address that. And
Maybe we can move all of the big loud parties down there. Because I want to there.
yeah, I mean, this is where,
your private entities, like we've talked about, that want to go in there and build hangars and rent spaces. We have to really take that serious at this point. Your Bill Gallagher's, they really want that. They want that access for the multimillionaires coming in here. It might not be a bad thing. It might be the funding source we're looking for.
What's in the way?
Motivation, I would say, is just getting it done. It's the time, really.
But I mean, what's the barrier? What barrier are we presenting for something like that to happen? Is my thing.
Yeah.
We've always been pretty open to any future development. The only real constrictions are the resources that are available, the utilities out there.
yeah, I think it's as anything, it's we have or not to say policy, but we when we have groups that express an interest, we definitely have the perspective to explore it and figure out, if there are opportunities. There's been various developers with Alexander Valley Resort, and we both had entertained those conversations. But I think it's also, if council says, yes, we want you as staff to really pursue marketing the airport, that's an initiative that we would then, part of our work plan really. So what I guess I'm saying is we haven't aggressively marketed or pursued, hey, what are our development opportunities?
It wasn't one of the priorities that we spoke of.
Yeah.
I guess if it would probably warrant a conversation with council, but just personally, as far as like development of the airport specifically, what my personal way that I would look at it is just like we look at it for other development development opportunities, which is you write a check that you put money in an escrow account, and we will do, the staff will do the work. To me, that's the only barrier that I would want to see, is that I'm not advising staff to go out on a wild goose chase and do a marketing program that's going to take 5 years. I just want to have it set up ahead of time so that the rules are really clear. If somebody comes and has a development program for the airport, we treat it like any other development, which is, make your check out for this amount to the city, and we will do the staff work for you.
I think that's the way it is.
I assume that's kind of the only barrier.
Yeah.
Because I just don't want staff to spend time doing this based on, I've heard somebody is interested.
Right.
They come and they write a check, then we will engage in a conversation with them and do the legwork for them. That's my position, having served on the former airport subcommittee and kind of, and dealt with, other folks coming to us with development proposals, just like Clearwater Ranch came and said, hey, this is kind of what we're interested in doing. And well, okay, great. If you are, then this is how much it will cost the city, and this is the check you need to write. And so there's no barrier.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's a barrier. It's more of proactive versus reactive, I think. And, right now we haven't been aggressive with the airport. It's just more reactive and more just trying to find grants to do the improvements versus an overall project of let's create a different type of amenity or a different space there. So,
Well, it's difficult because it is just something small on the outside of town in a small town, so it's not something to look, however, it's.
But with interest rates the way they are, just the likelihood of a project being, for the project, to me, if we're gonna spend resources on the project, has to be real. And if it's real, then they will write us a check to start. And so that's the issue for me, is we have a lot of other things that we're working on that are more likely to break before the airport's going to.
yeah, I think it's a function a large part of function of having a viable resort developer.
Yeah.
And I think once which is somewhat out of our hands.
It's out of our hands. Yeah.
And once and if the developer is chosen, I think.
Yeah.
It will precipitate a lot of conversation. Because we have a lot of conversations with all the developers who've come forward, it just has to
Yeah.
come to
But it's
fruition.
difficult because
Yeah.
it is a resource that it's a drain on the general fund. It's not a huge drain, but it is a drain. But I don't know if the effort to get out in front and stop the drainage is worth it until we have that Alexander Valley Resort deal, so.
Yeah.
But they write us a check. Show me the money.
So I think, Chair, we'll keep it as, maybe it's a standing item update and then have it be development of the fiscal year 24-25 budget, or 24-26 budget. And then we'll bring forward, every meeting, we'll have a discussion on some aspect of the budget, whether we start with conversation on general fund revenues, then we'll move to general fund expenditures, and then we'll just kind of work our way through the major funds.
Well, one meeting a month.
Yep.
That means there's
One section.
14 needed.
That's how you do
So it'd be great to get through that.
Okay.
So you guys choose which ones you want to go in order. I'm not big here.
No, sure, yes,
Perfect. Okay, E8.
this order.
I think this item was brought forward, I think Councilmember Bagby, you were inquiring about utilizing technology in, like OneDrive, asked us to be a future agenda item, so we put it here. I think the idea being take greater advantage of using OneDrive as a cloud, basically the cloud server for forms and maybe policies that is available to all council members and staff. And so obviously I want to make sure we captured what your thought was here. And I can say, I know we've been I don't know what it's playing with, but utilizing utilizing OneDrive it is a cloud server that is a component of our Microsoft Outlook services that we purchase. And it's a tool that enables document sharing and access without necessarily accessing the secure server. So what I know Susie's been kind of working on putting some of those forms in OneDrive. The way it's set up right now is that each of us has our own OneDrive account. So what we don't have in it's an area where we can explore is there kind of I don't want to say generic, but a generic OneDrive Cloverdale account where we can put forms and share documents. I know, for instance, Councilmember, you and I, when we worked on a PowerPoint together,
You have to email them back and
oh,
forth.
yeah, well, we've done the sharing part of it.
Yeah,
but-
yeah.
But that's been limited to that kind of a collaborating
Mhm.
exercise where we did the chamber presentation.
And I had to make you
But-
do that too.
No, and it worked good. It's how do we roll that out to the organization as a whole? And that's an area where usually you kind of have a roadmap and a kind of, here's where we want to start, here's what we want to make available, and then here's how you access it. And again, right now, the way it's set up is that it would be, like Susie would give access to her OneDrive folder, or I would give access. And you know, ideally, it's not one person. Because if one of us leaves the organization,
Right.
Yeah.
you know, so that's something we need to work through with IT is how do we set up that kind of global OneDrive account? But I think, you know, this is a broad heading, so, I don't want to steal your thunder if you
Not
had
at all.
more, you envision more with this, but I think that's.
Let's start there. Let's start there and then see where we get, and then you
Okay.
can kind of test it. Yeah, and maybe test it amongst employees, especially, well, if you're, which the holiday closures, it might be the perfect time to do that.
Yeah.
Is share documents that or projects that you might be working on in common and say, well, we're gonna just do this and do some testing and see how it works. So, yeah, let's just movement in that direction would be great.
Okay. No, we can do that. I think, you know, it's in creating more fillable forms and things like that. Those are things we need to just do more of.
Sounds good.
And next is E9, the evergreen analysis.
Okay, let's see. Let me pull the attachment here. This is analysis that was originally generated by Sonoma Clean Power as part of converting our utility accounts to evergreen from and comparing between Clean Smart, which is where our utility accounts are currently in to evergreen, which is 100% sustainable energy. And so this looks at the cost or increase of converting from Clean Smart to evergreen across all of our utilities. What our finance director did is kind of break down those expenses. I don't know, Susie, if you want to talk to that.
Sure. So the expenses, I took the total 56,500 that Evergreen suggested would be the cost for us to move to them. And then I broke it down by how we pay them. You can see City Hall, Police Station, obviously going to be general fund, right? And so I took anything that was general fund, and it's kind of broken down on page on the attachment at the bottom there. Total of the LNLs and water, wastewater. One thing to keep in mind is 56,500 is the cost regardless of how much we spend or how much we don't spend. So if we do go with solar and we start offsetting with solar, it's still going to cost 56,500. We'll just have to transfer that money around to less from wastewater if that's where the solar panels are going, because then they won't be paying that, right?
That's okay. So that was my question on this, because it's dated May 4th. And so not all of the energy upgrades were completed, but some things have been completed subsequently.
Yeah, most were not completed.
Most were not completed
at the time.
So I'm sorry, I did not understand what you just said.
So if we move and do
If you
more
do
solar,
okay, so go ahead.
so we'll offset the cost there,
Right.
but it's still gonna cost 56,500.
Yeah, I don't really understand. I don't understand that yet.
Based on our usage.
It's not based, well, it's based on this
It's like
total
shot here.
percentage, yep.
Okay.
Couldn't they recalibrate that after we?
I could ask them.
Yeah, I think we
but-
need, I think we still need that information. I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is like, if you're talking about the general fund versus enterprise funds, it might be a different discussion. And or consider, a really small amount, and there's money in that, there's money in the, like, for instance, if there were money for it in the sewer and water fund, but not in the general fund, it might be worth, is it so nominal, it might be worth considering. But I need these numbers to be updated based on the house, because that's what I was hoping to get was and that's kind of what I told Leaf at Sonoma Clean Power was, let us do our energy reduction first and then we look at it. But I don't think we have enough information yet.
Yeah, we can go back, because we've now, for instance, the PG&E owned versus city owned,
Mhm.
they're all city owned at this
Yeah.
point. And so, but we've upgraded those with LED lights, so we should be experiencing additional savings and of course, our cost reductions, but
Mhm.
also the corresponding, greenhouse gas reduction. So I think there's an opportunity to kind of relook at these numbers. We may need a couple more months of history
Yeah.
to really garner what the difference in cost is from pre-project to
I think we
post-project.
need a full year, because with solar, you really have to get a full year of data to know what your, and I think we were able to get in under, NEEM two.
That too.
So we need to know what the actual, true ups are and when we're generating and what rate we're selling back at. So it's really, really complicated. I don't think we have enough data to make the decision yet.
Yeah, we haven't completed we've got all of our photovoltaics, but
Yeah.
we're still finalizing our.
Oh, yeah.
our, interconnection agreement with PG&E
Right.
at the wastewater treatment plant.
Right.
We're pretty good to go on our water treatment plant.
Well, and then
but-
here's another question too, that, have we adjusted? Or is there room to adjust the behavior so that we are using power at peak time, at the peak of the depth curve, and using less power? We're actually using our own power at peak and then using less power at night.
Mhm.
So have we adjusted our power use to flatten the curve so that we're getting the most benefit from the solar?
Well, at the wastewater plant, we are doing that with
Okay,
batteries.
with the batteries,
Yeah,
okay,
the
yeah,
shade, what do they call it, shaving?
Yeah. Peak
the
shaving,
Peak shaving.
shaving,
right?
Okay.
And now that was probably reflected in the announcement,
Yeah.
but the PV has not, and then
Yeah.
all the upgrades in our lighting system. So.
yeah, no, my condition for considering this was having the data to reflect what our actual cost would be, and I don't think we don't have the data yet. So.
Yeah, and we just wanted to, we know this was requested to bring forward, so, we did,
Yeah.
finish the analysis, and so we wanted to bring this forward, but.
Well, and I hate to disappoint them, because we're, longstanding members, but at the same time, it's like that's always been my condition, is really knowing what Evergreen is going to actually cost us. And I think it's important that we consider this, in the future, because, Evergreen really represents 100% renewable energy, and that off-peak purchase comes from the geysers. And we're the closest city to the geysers. We have so many of those employees here. It's really, it's a local economic development issue that our energy dollars are going back into local jobs and our local energy production. So, I think it's important that we keep this on the agenda, but considering what our budget situation is and decisions we're having to make, these numbers aren't accurate. We can't make a decision based on this. Yeah. That's as the FDP board member, I'm willing to just tell them, we have to wait another year before we can really consider it again.
So bring it back in a year.
Bring it back in a year, because I think then we'll actually have the data to know what our peak energy use is, and we'll be able to make it. I think these numbers are gonna change significantly,
I do too.
smaller. Right now, and so we're being asked to make a decision on incomplete information, and I'm not gonna do that on a financial decision like this, not when we're possibly 800 grand in red, so.
Thank you. All right. Those that believe ahead all of you.
Yeah, so the standing items, at least the first three items. There are reports in your packet, and we're just here to answer if you have any questions about any of those items. On the cannabis item, I just want to mention that, we heard from the subcommittee that any outstanding payments were it was critical that we worked with the cannabis industry on getting caught up, and I can assure you that Susie has been very diligent in working with our candidates reporters on collecting the revenue that's overdue. Is there anything more you want to say on that? Yeah. But any questions?
Okay,
after?
Exactly what he's talking about.
I mean, this may be something in looking at the revenue side of the budget. This is a revenue source, so that might be something that helps inform your budget discussion about revenues.
And
It
honestly,
is a
at
revenue
this
source
point,
at this point.
it is not a revenue. And I hate these words coming out of my mouth, they'd be better off just not to charge a tax. And
That's
just,
a really good, that's a good
Because
point,
it's
is that the
not
overhead
money.
is, and I think that there's so much frustration from the industry as well, because the issue is not with you and the city, the issue is really with the state.
right,
And they're having to meet those requirements, so that's actually, I appreciate your
Yeah.
candor.
well, either that or not have an annual fee and roll it all into one, do one or the other, but trying to keep track of both things, when one's due on one day and one's
Be
due.
open for recommendations at a future meeting on this.
I'd like to see more on it.
Yeah.
My question is, we still have requirements that we have to do as
Yeah.
enforcement.
Yeah.
So now it's costing us more money.
Yeah,
You're less work for you, more work for him, for no money.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we have to actually revert back towards more tax and add in that, or maybe get rid of the annual fee
Yeah,
yeah.
and
add more
still have
tax.
And add more,
have
yeah.
higher tax.
and have a cap,
Then that way
I mean,
it's
what
a
is,
monthly-
we just do like 17% tax or something?
Well,
It's like gigantic.
yeah, they're taking applications, so, and I mean, for me, I think the idea of this being a completely nascent industry, having taken this on and being one of the first cities to do it, it's a completely nascent industry, this is not surprising, it's never been about the revenue for me, it's been about the jobs and the businesses being here. And I just, being out in the community and talking to folks, the ability for people who are sick or who have sick kids to be able to access this and not have to go to Healdsburg, not have to go to Ukiah. It's really a public service, but we need to look at ways where we absolutely minimize the expense of maintaining this while we're maintaining our commitments where enforcement is concerned. So I'd be willing to hear back. Yeah.
And
I've
I-
just information.
It's the same, it's not about making money, it's about funding the commitment.
Yeah.
And that's what I look at, so the we're at zero or in the black, it's never.
This industry isn't going away. The mobile home parks our issues are not going away. This is just gonna have to be dealt with, but how do we lower our overhead as much as possible and also be responsive to the industry and the ones that are doing good work and doing a good job. I don't want to see them have to,
Right.
they shouldn't have to pay for
A
other
couple
people
bad
being a
apples.
couple of bad apples.
Yeah.
Anything else on any of those three, cannabis report, the revenue tracking worksheet, or grant writing investment options?
I do have a question on grant writing. I just was wondering, are we, we're really taking advantage of infrastructure grants and things for parks and roads and open space, but are we, as far as community grants, are we, by depending on West Yost, which is, they're great at getting the grants that they're great at getting. I'm wondering if not having access to, or partnering to find a grant writer for some things like, the theater. For kids programs, for community programs. I'm wondering if we are really taking advantage of all of the potential money that is out there for maybe more social or after school programs, things like that, parks programs.
Well, I think, the matrix that's included in the packet is being developed by West Yost or is developed by them, but, there's quite a bit of input and direction from staff. So when we see opportunities, we send it to them. So, I want to just say that I think it's a reflection of the grant opportunities that we see. But where if I was to look at this, I think there's a gap is in more of the private kind of foundation money and, non-governmental agencies that offer funds for things. It's the challenge there is that they're so wide and varied, is how do we how do you link, projects that we're doing with some of those foundations, and that's where it's a little more of an art than a science. And this was really to kind of try to help reflect, all the especially federal funding that's out there in these different programs, and to give us a tool to try to match those to projects. But what it's not doing is matching funding needs in the community with other foundation or private grants that are available through, non-governmental sources. So that's an area where we have to kind of explore where are there opportunities for us to. There's not a lot of folks out there that track those, unless someone maybe who's in the field of art, they have kind of a set of funding organizations that they know of, that so we have to kind of broaden this to, I think, include some of those other categories with, we want what council would say, for example, we have a tremendous need for, more art programs, for example, and what are those opportunities to pursue for grant funding in that arena? Because there's so many kind of, you can go.
Oh God, it just goes on.
All kinds of telehealth, art, you name it. There's programs out there that you can target for trying to find, foundations that will assist us to trying to get prioritized and, find where it makes sense for us to kind of put our efforts.
Yeah, it's tough because you guys, your time is very limited and your scope is very limited, but I know that we need the sewers to work, and we also need programs for kids. So it's kind of like, and I know we're gonna have to prioritize we're gonna be making very difficult choices over the next year or two. But it's just something that I'm aware of when I look at that grant sheet, which is very helpful to just kind of know what we're going out for, what we're looking for. But, with the presentation from the Northern Sonoma County Healthcare Foundation and their survey, there is also a great desire in the community for, some of those community resources. And it's how do we balance our time and ability to go after that grant money?
Yeah, and I think that's where it represents an opportunity for us to take a partner or collaborative role with them, and I think we do that. A good example is the senior center. Literally, last Friday, calls Kevin at 10 o'clock in the morning, needing a letter of support by noon.
There you go.
On a funding source that wasn't not on our list. That they were going for, and kind of last minute, but in essence, it was something that was very specific to seniors, and wouldn't have necessarily come on our radar.
Right.
But they brought it to our attention, and they asked us to jump, and we did. And so and I think similarly has been the case with like La Familia Sana. Jade had said, for example, I'm gonna go for this grant, can I get you a letter? Can I get a letter? Of course.
Okay.
And so we're not saying no, we're trying to be partners and collaborators and show our support. Do we take into a leadership position and start looking for those funding sources that they're looking for? That's just a little more challenging, I think, and that's not necessarily something that West Coast is doing, but they will do it if we ask them, hey, let's look for, foundation sources, and there are, grant programs out there that will help us, do those searches to find, the kind of the more disparate funding sources. They just cover the cost. So that's the question.
Cover the cost.
on that.
I just didn't wanna let that go again without having a little bit more discussion, so if we could kind of think about that, especially over the next year or two, when our resources are gonna be very constricted.
Right.
How we can partner with community groups so that we can still bring grant money and still bring programs to seniors and kids and everybody in between.
Right, we had that conversation with the senior center, we had a budget discussion.
Yeah.
And, that was one of them, is looking at their gap, how can it be funded or be met or addressed through some of the grant funds out there, how can we help?
How can we
Just a quick answer for under F2. When do we get nervous and have to start talking about water rates again?
So our study was
I
done
don't know,
for,
because I'm new to this part of it, so.
Okay.
yeah, it was a 5-year, period, what are we in, year 3?
2 or 3,
to-
I think.
I
We're calling it 3. I'm.
You got a couple of years.
I still got 2 or 3.
Pretty easy.
It's
So
at
then-
the end of this budget that is,
Yeah,
so
that's
2 more years.
yeah, 2 more
Yeah,
years.
I guess it was meant. So then I guess with this, seeing 3 out of 4 months in a deficit, do we start changing our message towards water use and things like that to try to boost the numbers? What do we do now? Because we can't keep taking $30,000 deficit months, you know what I mean?
Right,
And so we have to find a way to spend that now too. And
How
I
do
know,
we increase conveyance fees, after the time period is expired? And that's how PG&E does it.
well,
We're saving money by saving energy, well, let me tell you, it's all about delivery. Yep.
so, well,
There
just,
was a question in there, David.
I'm gonna just pull up real quick, on our website, we've got the, full 2021 water and wastewater study. So in rate adjustments, first one was July 21, second one was July 22, one that just went by, the third was July 23.
Right.
So we're in the third year of rate increases. We have 2 more. July 1st, 24 and 25.
but we really take a $300,000 hit if that happens, if it continues. I mean,
Yeah.
even if it's 100,000, that's a huge hit in our water. If we don't do something different or change our messaging.
Right, and what we did do prior to, I guess it would have now been the July 1st, 2022 rate increase, was we went back to our rate consultant because we had the infusion of the grant funds. And there was a kind of a clamor to not adjust the rates based on the rate study, because we got those grant funds, but the decision based on the analysis was to continue those rate increases were still critically important for generating the fund balance needed to fund critical infrastructure upgrades. So in terms of timing, it's a considerable effort to do the rate study, the financial study. We'll want to begin that within the next 2-year budget cycle of looking at rates again. I think, Mayor, I think what you're speaking to is how can we ensure that we're generating the rate revenue that
How do we flip what we're doing now as short term? Not looking for the 5-year, I'm looking for how do we stop the $33,000 hits in a month? Are we going to have to take off some of our CPIs, and not do some of the projects we want, because we're going to backfill
Yeah.
our water?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be.
I don't want to do that, I'm trying to.
Right.
Find what we do now.
I think we probably want to do some analysis, because I see what you're referring to, is that in the month of October, year-over-year comparison, we were down 33,000 in revenue, and that's what that I think is a reflection of is customers are conserving.
They're conserving too, that's what I mean, is our message, we have to change our projects, is our message burn baby burn and use up all the water you possibly can? I don't know what
Yeah.
I'm saying, what do we do to flip it to start?
Right, and I think probably it'd be good for us to re-engage with our rate consultant to do some additional analysis. And you know, one, we want to make sure that we're on track with our capital improvements and maintaining an adequate fund balance in doing so, funding those. Which, for instance, one of the projects that is critically important is the Cherry Creek Reservoir replacement project. And, you know, we're gonna give an update to the Public Works Subcommittee next week on that project. And we want to start the design phase, and I'm asking, you know, to develop preliminary cost estimates as soon as we can, so we can compare that with our budget. So I think that's work we're gonna need to do to see how the change in water usage is gonna affect the schedule of capital projects and where we forecasted we were gonna be versus where we really are. But
Yeah, I think also, if you look at the total for 22-23, you can see there was $3.6 million. I don't think we ever budgeted that much, but because we had that drought surcharge, that was 25%, that is pushing all of these up. But so what you're seeing is not necessarily a loss that we had, but it's less revenue than we had the previous year. And
Right, because if you look at it, steadily goes up about 15, then did a big jump. And so, or, you know, you have
yeah,
312, 300, 317, then it goes to 370 basically.
So what are the revenue projections? I'm just kind of to follow up on that, if I may, sorry.
Please.
What are the revenue projections for the new housing starts like Baumgartner? Because those units are, they're multifamily housing, they use far less water, but they're paying for the hookup. So we'll actually get more, you know, infrastructure money and then less, you know, monthly use money from those. So with the projects that we have in the pipeline, do we know where we stand for our water revenue?
yeah, so that gets back to our rate study, and one of the things that it was Mark Hildebrand, we looked at anticipated growth and that was factored into the rate revenue, right? So it all kind of cascades.
Yeah.
And so in theory, you know, additional customers should lead to additional water consumption, which could lead to additional revenue. Right. And you're absolutely right. There's kind of two discrete revenue sources. One is the one-time impact fee, which is on the council agenda to receive a report from last year. But then there's the ongoing, and
well, there's the impact fee, then there's the base rate that people pay, and then there's the water rate that people pay. So it's really three.
yeah,
I think of it as three. So I would imagine that the impact fees are going to help us offset some of those capital. So, but I guess with that information, it's like, is it as bad as it looks from a pure revenue standpoint, like this month in October? Yeah, or this year in October.
Yeah, but it's hard to tell when you look at any one month.
Yeah, you have to have a year's worth of information.
Because I mean, you could say 2023 is $33,000 less than the same October last year, but it's you know, 16,000 more than the year previous.
Yeah.
And part of it was, well, we wanted to, for some reason, October seems like
Even if you took October off the plate,
yeah,
we're less on the two prior months, or, you know, what is it, July and August, when we should be about 5% higher.
right.
And that's what.
Already there, really, yeah.
I'm trying to minimize, you know,
Yeah.
5% higher than the year before. We should show some type of positive signals, and we're not.
Yeah, and the challenge without doing another rate study is you really can't go beyond the maximum rates without redoing that rate study. So the solution gets back to some kind of demand side policy or our program, you know, do we encourage.
I said,
Yeah.
I've said this before, this is like the gas tax funding roads, this is, we want people to use less gas and funding roads with that, we're getting screwed, but it's the same problem.
Yeah.
So, you know, and so I think I've asked you before to put your big brains on this, it's like, this is a problem that, I mean, almost every city has got to be, you know, that has its own water system is having to deal with, is that how do you deal with the fiscal impacts of conservation? And it may be that that we have to deal with it by either, you know, the bond that we're going out for, or a sales tax, or we have to increase the cost of conveyance. You know, that's where the revenue has to come from, the revenue needs to come from maintaining the system, not the product that we're delivering. Yeah, and that's probably totally illegal, and I don't know what I'm talking about, but that's it. But from a fiscal standpoint, I mean, if you're looking at it from, you know, a CEO perspective, you've got to lower expenses and increase revenue. So is it actually raining out there? I do not have an umbrella, and my husband told me, oh, it's looking good. Okay.
I can wait, you can borrow.
He's under your
Yeah.
eyes. Yeah.
So it's it's not an easy solvable issue.
Yeah.
In,
But I
you
think
know,
that the problem is that it was really created at a time when this was not a concern and times have changed. So we are going to have to change how we bill and collect for this resource.
Especially with all the added things
Yeah.
that we have to do with the
All-
water system.
All the added stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, maybe one of the potential solutions would be to increase the base rate.
Yeah,
You know, because part of that base rate calculation is what are the fixed costs for operating the system that don't change and I think what we've seen is this change occur that, especially with the inflationary impacts of materials
yeah.
that are so
Because
critical.
that means that there's a greater percentage of that infrastructure cost that is that should be accounted for in the base rate, but it's not. We're trying to make up for it in the commodity,
Mhm.
and that's just, it's not working. The model does not work anymore.
Right, and so that's kind of revisiting the rate setting.
Yeah.
So even though I completely agree, I want to ask one more thing, just and do it the opposite. Commodity. Do you think Berry Public had any effect on these numbers? I don't know how big they were and how much they use, I have no idea. I'm just asking, say, maybe it's something that we started. Okay.
Yeah, they were one of the biggest water.
I just wasn't sure how much that really was.
Yeah,
Maybe just-
I think without a doubt, we saw revenue impact with CC and their operation, because they were one of our top 10 customers. So, you know, you can look at it that way, we lost one of our top 10, probably our top 3 are customers.
But the money they paid in advance for helping us pay for I think it was 2 new wells, was it 2 new wells? And that's a gift that keeps giving. So.
Yeah, no, it was still a good decision.
Yeah.
I was,
Yeah.
and I agree that it shouldn't be based off commodity,
Yeah.
was looking to see
I
what
think
could
it's
have brought
really-
this case.
I think it's really more about the fact that it is the conveyance it is a bigger percentage of maintaining the system now than it is delivering the commodity. Electricity is cheap, water is relatively cheap. It's the stuff that you need to generate it and get it from one place to another, and that cost has gone up. And I think if we revisited the rate study, that's what we would find, so.
Sorry to drag that one out.
No,
It's an
It's
important
water.
conversation.
it's the top 3 of what we do, law enforcement, water, well, still it's not for good sewer.
And I,
Every people notice.
the kind of a technical term that I think about is referred to as the elasticity of demand. And
Yes.
whether, you know, also the rate increases can have an effect where people reduce their water more than you expect they would.
Yeah.
Because of the increase in rates, and, you know, we don't know that, right? It's,
And we don't even have all the smart meters installed yet.
yeah.
So
And,
when people actually see that and are actually get real-time information that, oh, if I'm 3 days away from the close of the billing month cycle and I'm really close to going to my next the next year, I'm gonna turn off my sprinklers. We're gonna see an even bigger impact, I think, when people have that real time information, more people have that real time information. It's like the debt curve, but not over the period of day, David, it's over like the year.
I had a customer that had that flume, so it's called.
Yeah,
Minute by minute,
Yeah.
and so it's fun to go, I just use 0.2 and I'm sitting there with you, find my leak.
that's where we gave this away for free.
Wow.
Yeah, because, and they turned it, they think that's when they passed us as the biggest savers of water. I think that was when it happened, was we got most of their flumes installed. So now I don't know if we want to beat them. I don't think we want to take back that position until we figure out this finance problem.
All right, anything on the R3C?
The planning work continues with R3C. Vanessa will be attending the next meeting. We heard there was support for participating in the MOU. We're going to continue to work with Winter, who's leading up that effort.
Speaking of water, grandfather recharge. Water use.
Anything on code enforcement?
Well, I think there's a code enforcement hearing on Thursday here at City Hall.
This is one of our repeat offenders that
Okay.
the mayor is very familiar with, but we're dragging them in again.
So they even ask us.
No,
It's a car wash.
It's a-
Okay,
For graffiti and more stuff showing up.
Anybody interested in eminent domain? Sorry. That makes you sick.
they're getting close. All right, council meeting furniture arrangement.
This is the stand. We don't have any further.
Are you kidding?
This was to
I want to hang
figure out a new seating arrangement at the CPAC. And Mike was still researching alternatives that were lower cost than the Trope Group provided.
Yeah.
But they are kind of specialized. And we may come back and recommend Trope just from the perspective who we can't find something that's
Spend any more time on this and you.
it's off the shelf. There's just not a lot of off the shelf.
Walmart office.
Shop class. Right. Sorry. Yeah.
The CPAC is also requested, they want something that minimize the space.
Pay their set designer to do it, and then they can keep the money. Mike?
I'm open to anything. The trope groups,
We'll give them $20,000.
Why someone's listening. All right. D1, discussion law enforcement JPA.
That was, I think Councilmember Bagley, you requested that item and, I know the chief's not here. We put it as a future agenda item. We just wanted to see if there was any guidance that you were looking at in particular on that. At this point.
No, I just am putting it out there for, like, if we get, let's just consider it at a later date,
Okay,
Okay.
an opportunity comes.
Any other future agenda items? Great. All right, meeting adjourned.
I don't think this came out.
Run.